And we are still on Article 1, but we are getting to the end. Remember, Article 1 has 10 sections. We have made it through 7. And so we have seen how Congress is structured. We have seen who is leadership, how they have rules, how they can punish their members. We have seen how the bill becomes the law. And we know that that is not an easy process. And so putting that in the rearview mirror, we're now going to move on to specifically what did the framers identify as the responsibility of Congress. And this is where we're going to find a whole ton of information in terms of their specific powers. Now, remember, the framers wanted Congress to have the bulk of the power because they are the ones that are representing the people, whether it's by population or directly by state. And so we're going to go into this particular article, and there are 18 subsections in Article 1, Section 8. So I'm going to go through this slowly because I think it is so important that students understand the power Congress holds. Some Congresses leverage that power, some Congresses don't. And so the framers wanted to make sure that what Congress does is specifically spelled out. All right, so when we go first, we're going to talk about what we refer to as enumerated or delegated, or I think there's one more, expressed powers. Now, the odd thing about these powers is, let me just, enumerated, and I'm going to write this, enumerated means list. And so when we look at Article 1, Section 8, we are going to see just that, a list of powers delegated, or a list of powers. We're just gonna stop right there because that's the enumerated part. Then we get into what's called the delegated, and delegated is given to. So there's a list of powers that are specifically given to Congress in the Constitution. And the word expressed is specifics. So if we look at Article 1, Section 8 here, we see that in this list that I'm going to go through, there's a list of powers, specific powers that are given directly to Congress. And so I'm going to keep using those terms. When I use any of those terms, use any of the terms, I am referencing the same part of the Constitution. And you can tell my typing sucks. So if I say the enumerated powers of Congress, I'm referring to Article 1, Section 8. If I say the delegated powers of Congress, I'm referring to the same exact list. If I use the term expressed, the expressed powers of Congress, I'm talking about the specific things Congress has a responsibility to carry out. So I don't want you to get confused when I start using those terms interchangeably, because you can't. All those terms are literally referencing the same exact part of the Constitution. All right, so moving forward, it is more important to me that instead of having all of the whole thing written out, you only put into your notes what's highlighted. So the first thing the framers put into the Constitution is that Congress has the power to collect taxes. Remember the Articles of Confederation, that was the main thing that caused that document to fail, is because there was no ability to create or build a national treasury. And so the first thing the framers put down as the right of Congress is that they have the power to lay and collect taxes. Here we see duties, imposts, excises. and to pay the debts provided by the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. So, in order to run a government, Congress, the framers knew that Congress had to have the ability to tax the states in order to run the federal government. So, we've talked about this already. Congress has the power of the purse. They have the checkbook. They decide on an annual basis, based on budget requests from the president, what money is coming into the Treasury and how that money is going to get spent. The framers did say that they do not want to tax exports of the states. Okay. And this is, I'm going back to their framing of the Constitution because I know there are questions about how it's being handled today. And I am just going to put out there that I'm going back to what it says the Constitution and the framers delegated. So they based, and they knew, and the framers laid this out, that taxes would be based on the rule of apportionment, meaning the more people you had in your state, the more taxes your state would be required to contribute to this initial national treasury. Keep in mind, it is not until 1913 with the 16th Amendment that we had the power to tax incomes. So the original taxing of the federal government was done on the states based on the population of the states. The second power that the framers delegated in this enumerated grouping, they gave this power, this expressed power was given directly to Congress in this list, is the ability to borrow money on credit of the United States. And so what we see, and this is probably material that you're going to remember Miss Ingberg talking to you about, but we sometimes have to borrow money because something big happens. And so Congress, and you guys were literally in her class, front row seat to watch as Congress has manipulated the debt ceiling, saying we can't spend any more than this amount as a government. And so what Congress has continued to do is raise that debt ceiling. And so government sometimes will, in order to have money now rather than hoping it'll come later, they will do and they will sell debt securities, treasury bills, notes, and bonds. And I know you went over that with Miss Ingberg. But just to give you a little bit of more, just a reminder, the difference between a treasury note and a treasury bond, and I think this is the best way to do it. A treasury note, you're saving for college because it's going to mature in anywhere from 2 to 10 years. But a treasury bond, buying in longer term into the United States, is something that is going to be set aside, and people are cashing those in, and a lot of it is because of retirement. So initially in our government, they did not have that initial ability to, we didn't have the money. So we had to come up with creative ways in which our government, in its origin, could exist with money to make the government work. All right, moving on. Third power that Congress, or the framers specifically gave to Congress, was the ability to regulate commerce, the ability to regulate trade. And they are very specific in identifying that Congress oversees our trade with foreign nations. Congress oversees any trade that's happening over and across state boundaries. And Congress has the power to regulate any trade we had or have with native tribes. Okay, so this means tariffs are Congress's power. Trade agreements, Congress's power. When we talked about the Senate, we talked about how when the president creates a treaty, treaties have to be approved by the Senate. So presidents can't just go and make an agreement with another country. I lie, they can. It's a different process. But when we come to formal treaties, that has to be done through Congress. And again, I know things look bizarre in the way things are happening now, and I would be very interested if any of this goes to the Supreme Court in questioning what part, if any, um, they would come back to what it says in Article 1, Section 8, and say a president doesn't have power over those tactics. All right, so Power 4 is Congress has the power to establish rules of naturalization. In the United States, we recognize citizenship two different ways. We recognize citizenship based on if you are born here or you're born on U.S. soil. The other way to become a U.S. citizen is through naturalization. Well, naturalization requires some massive steps. You have to live in the United States for a certain amount of time. You have to take a test. You have to meet with immigration services. You have an unbelievable background check done to you. And all of those requirements have been established over the last 230 plus years because Congress has the power to do those things. Okay, so, and it also talks about bankruptcy. And it's odd that they throw these things together, but it is so critical for us to understand that later, and I'm going to see if I can't write here, later in the 14th Amendment, we will actually have an amendment that specifically says any person born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen of the United States and the state wherein they reside. So not only did the 14th Amendment, along with the 13th and the 15th, were known as Civil War amendments. And so once slavery was abolished in the 13th Amendment, the question came to be, what is now, are these former slaves considered citizens? And we have the amendment that says if they were born in the United States, they are a citizen of the country and the state where they're living. So Congress could have made that ruling, but in order to make it even higher above Congress in the later years changing a decision, that became part of the Constitution, which is very difficult to change. All right, moving on. Congress has the power to coin money. Okay, we didn't have a national currency. We had in the articles, every state had their own currency. And so when the country was established, one of the first things they said is we need to have one currency. We need to have one, doesn't matter what state you're in. It's kind of like this is how the euro came to be, is they looked at how we did this. And so Congress decides what our currency is, what it looks like. Congress has the ability to oversee exchange rates. And then if you go further into this, not only do they have the ability to regulate coin and money, I also want to highlight, well, it's not going to highlight for me. It's going to be a stinker. I also want to highlight this. Congress has the power to set the standards of weights and measures. So Congress is the reason why we use what is called the imperial system, and the rest of the world uses the metric system. So could we also be on the metric system? Absolutely. But Congress would have to make the decision in order to do that. So I think, yep, I'm going to go through this last one, and then I'm going to have the video stopped, and I want you to watch this SNL. I thought it was one that was just a classic about how we set up our new nation. So the last one that I'm going to go through in this video is Congress's ability to punish counterfeiters. There's no question. The minute a new currency comes out, somebody's counterfeiting it. I used to work in a gas station when I was in high school, and I remember somebody coming in and handing me a bill, and literally, not even joking, it had been photocopied. And so it is a federal offense to use currency or try to disguise something and pass it off as U.S. currency. So again, we've gone through 6. We've got a whole list more, but this is where I want to stop, and we'll watch this SNL video.